Welcome! I am Yvonne Ortiz and this is Stories of Transformation, an NRCDV radio production. As a part of our Domestic Violence Awareness Month activities, each week in October we bring you our own My One Thing series so you can hear directly from individuals working against gender-based violence as they share their personal stories of motivation and inspiration. In this third episode of My One Thing series, we bring you two different storytellers, each centering around the one thing everyone can do to support resilience and healthy development of children. We start with a story from the Fairfax County Office on Women and Domestic and Sexual Violence Services in Fairfax, Virginia. Their program provides compassionate and comprehensive state-accredited programs to women, men, teens, and children who have been affected by domestic and sexual violence, stalking, and human trafficking. In their story, staff members address the impact that exposure to domestic violence can have on a child and offer insight on how community members can help to foster resilience and make a positive impact in the lives of children exposed to domestic violence.
What were the sounds of your childhood? Were they playing with friends in the neighborhood, the ice cream truck coming down the block, splashing in the pool? Or were they muffled yelling behind closed doors, police sirens arriving at your house, doors slamming shut? The one thing Fairfax County wants people to know about domestic violence is that it affects children more than we realize, but it's never too late to make a difference in a child's life, no matter what your job might be. We know that kids are far more aware of the violence that exists in their homes in all its forms, even when they are babies and can't understand language. They hear tone of voice, they feel the stress from their caregivers, and it affects their brain at the deepest levels. Even when older kids don't see the violence, they can share a victim's fear, uncertainty, and terror. The good news is that no matter what happened in the family, important people in a child's life can help them begin to heal. It can be a protective parent or a teacher, a daycare provider, a neighbor, or a coach. There's been lots of conversations lately about kids who experience hard things and how it shapes them. It might seem like everyone is talking about adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, right now. And it's true that the importance of understanding trauma is getting a lot of attention these days. And for good reason. Until recently, we had no idea that ACEs are relatively common. More than half of Americans have experienced at least one ACE, which can have significant long-term consequences depending on the child's experience of the ACE and the support they receive after. But what happens when you have lots of ACEs? Is there a magic number of ACEs where long-term physical and mental health outcomes could significantly worsen for a child? The original authors of the ACE study recognize that when a child has 4 or more ACEs, their long-term physical health prognosis gets dramatically worse, including their risk for premature death. Further analysis of the original ACE data found that every other category of ACEs, from having a parent in jail to having a mental health disorder, was strongly associated with witnessing domestic violence as a child. As adults, children who lived in homes where DV occurred often or very often were significantly more likely than their peers who didn't see abuse in their homes to abuse alcohol, use illegal drugs, especially intravenous ones, and feel depressed. As a community, we believe that a rising tide lifts all boats, and by focusing on children who witness domestic violence in all of its forms, we can build a healthier future here in Fairfax. We're in a unique position because we wear 2 hats. We're direct service providers for families impacted by domestic violence, but we're also the Fairfax County government. Because we are a municipal government, we get to impact kids' lives in a variety of ways, from helping a third grader find their new favorite book at the library to helping kids find their new best friend at summer camp, to supporting the adults who are having a harder time with their baby going to kindergarten than the kindergartner is, to helping a parent reentering the workforce find someone they can trust to help them with childcare. We know we're privileged to have an opportunity to make a difference for the most vulnerable in our community. With privilege comes responsibility for everyone in our community, including children who witnessed violence. Recovery and support for children who have been exposed to domestic violence can be a lifelong journey. Despite how resilient, responsible, or independent a child may seem, they need support too. There can be power and healing in just being able to speak to someone outside of the situation. The violence will impact kids differently at different stages in their lives, and getting help as soon as possible is the best way to break the cycle of violence. Across the country, our one thing is supporting children and families that are experiencing domestic violence. But we know we can't just do that in one way. Why not? In Fairfax, we speak 187 languages. Almost 40% of us speak a language other than English at home. We are lifelong residents, transplants from other parts of the country, and new immigrants. Over 25% of us are under the age of 20. Because of the unique makeup of our county, we need everyone's skills and talents to raise up our families and children. Our counselors see children and parents who experience domestic violence. But because we understand the way this trauma affects the whole family, we also work with children who never saw the violence, but who may have heard it, who feel the impact of a loss of income, or by having to move, who feel and see the fear of their caregiver, who see bruises, or who know their family is different than other families. Many people don't know that the younger the child is when the violence occurs, the more impacted they are. Often, it's because older children can let you know how they're doing, but we can't forget that infants are in such a vulnerable place in their development that they feel everything. Counselors help a child process their experiences and develop tools for moving past the pain into a safer, more stable life. Safety for the entire family is our Domestic Violence Action Center's advocates' number one priority. The majority of our DVAC clients have children living in the home. New clients who may be afraid to seek advocacy services for themselves often still want help for their children. By supporting the children who have witnessed or been impacted by domestic violence, victim advocates have an opportunity to build trust and rapport with the parent. When our client speaks with a professional about safety options, the entire family benefits. Parents who have been abused can face significant parenting challenges on top of dealing with their own trauma. Figuring out what your family looks like after domestic violence and what the best life is for your children going forward might seem like a monumental task. Our victim advocates educate our clients and community about these dynamics while working to identify and communicate options for the safety of the family and the healing for children. We know that children love both their parents, and that means providing support for the entire family. The Anger and Domestic Abuse Prevention and Treatment Program, or the ADAPT program, addresses the impact of ACEs during our 18-session treatment program. We provide participants with education around the impact of ACEs, along with the opportunity to process their own personal experiences with childhood trauma. We give participants the skills in order to help them and their children heal and change the patterns and cycles in their households. During the ADAPT 18-session program, we teach our participants ways in which domestic violence impacts children, along with the emotional needs of children, and the ways in which those who have engaged in the violence can talk to the children about past violence in order to facilitate healing. We teach our participants positive discipline techniques, along with emotional regulation skills to help them regulate their anger prior to disciplining their children or interacting with their partners. While no one person can do everything, we know everyone in Fairfax County can do one thing. Encourage a survivor to connect with a victim advocate in their community. Know the domestic violence resources in our community and carry our number with you in your phone. Understand that leaving an abusive relationship can create more danger for some people, and don't judge someone's choices. One thing people can do is to understand that the person in the domestic violence situation is doing their best and is the expert about their circumstances and the possible consequences if they try to leave the relationship. When children are involved, one thing people can do is offer to help. Watch the kids for a few hours. Grab some groceries for the person when you go to the store. Be there to listen. For some people, volunteering their time is the one thing they do to make an impact in our community. Volunteers' skills and talents play an important role in helping us to create a Fairfax where everyone can live free of violence. Right now, in our office, we have 89 active volunteers directly supporting our services on our hotline, with victims in the court and hospitals, educating our community, co-facilitating our psychoeducational groups, and assisting with data and client intake. Collectively, our volunteers contributed over 11,373 hours in fiscal year 2018 alone. We could not do the work we do without help from our volunteers. We have volunteers who assist monthly as hospital support and company advocates, hotline volunteers, and community ambassadors all at once. We even have volunteers that have been with us for over 10 years. It's incredible to see people coming together as a team to tackle the issues in our community. Their dedication raises awareness and inspires others to join us in service. The great thing about volunteering is that anyone can help make an impact by donating their time. We have a great group of volunteers that are a clear example that everyone can do one thing to end domestic violence. If you're still searching for your one thing, join us in impacting the lives of children who witness domestic violence. Be the one to reach out to a child in a difficult situation. Be the one to get a child to a counselor. Be the one to be educated about domestic violence.
Our second story comes from Ali, a wife, mom, dog mom, and advocate who served as a manager of counseling and advocacy at the Houston Area Women's Center. Her position has provided her with a great variety of opportunities to speak out about domestic violence, including media appearances, testifying in the Texas Senate, providing expert witness testimony in criminal and immigration court, as well as working with countless survivors in their healing processes. Ali feels privileged to have a job that provides so many moments of empowerment and gratitude, but most importantly, to be witness to some of the most courageous transformations in survivors. In her story, Ali shares how she promotes gender equality and healthy relationships in raising her son.
I've been in the field of trauma work for almost 15 years. The stories I've heard about abuse and violence have, on one hand, shattered my perception of the world, while, on the other, given me a sense of hope and the ability to see strength and resiliency take place firsthand. I carry those stories, those memories, that abuse with me on a daily basis as motivation to create change. I love watching change occur in a woman's life when she feels empowered, when she is heard, when she is valued. As a woman myself, so much of my life has been dedicated to giving voice to those who society has said are not of worth, are not believable, are not capable. When I found out I was pregnant 5 years ago, I was certain I was going to have the chance to create an empowered feminist. Little did I know, he would be a male and not the female baby I expected. When I found out I was having a son, I remember the anxiety creeping in. I remember the shame and the fear of not knowing what to do with a boy. Sitting in the ultrasound room, I remember asking myself, how do I raise a son? As the tears dried up and my visions of pink and Disney princesses faded, I found myself revisiting those stories, those memories, that abuse, and suddenly, that fear became a flame. Not the type of fire that eats you alive, but the one that lights your way, gives you hope, and gives you voice. I hadn't lost my chance at creating an empowered feminist. I gained the opportunity to challenge the standards of society that I had spent all this time fighting already. I was gifted with an opportunity to raise a good human, a respectful, honest, non-abusive, understanding consent man. So my one thing that I want my child to know is, forget about being a good man. Concentrate on being a good human. While I want you to respect women, I want you to respect yourself just as much. There is far too much pressure on young boys and men to man up. The old school thought process that quantifies being a good man to the strong, silent type. One who never cries, holds open doors for women, whose manliness is measured by how many women he can get in a sack. These are the sort of manly goals that I dearly hope to squash. I wish for you to be able to focus on who you are and what your values are as an individual, as a human being with gender left out of it. I want you to understand what bodily integrity is, and to have no qualms with knowing that by the mere fact you are male, you are privileged. I really hope you have a solid awareness about sexual violence and manage to steer clear of the peer pressure, frat house type of culture that minimizes these issues and pats perpetrators on the back while blaming the women. To me, this will lead you well on your way to being a good human, the good man.
Thank you to both Allie and Fairfax County Office on Women and Domestic and Sexual Violence Services for demonstrating to us that it takes a village to support the healthy development of children. Next week, we bring you our last episode in this series with one thing communities can do to break the silence and support women of color. To hear more NRCDV podcasts and to access additional resources on gender-based violence and related topics, visit nrcdv.org. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at NRCDV. Stories of Transformation is an NRCDV radio podcast production brought to you by the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence. Support is provided by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families, Family and Youth Services Bureau.